My fellow Supergenes, welcome back to another episode of Supergene Unleashed. If you have ever felt like you were doing everything right, eating clean, working out, staying disciplined, yet still dealing with stubborn weight, bloating, cravings, inflammation, fatigue, or just frustrated that you really can't get results, stay with us. This episode is for you. Today's guest is someone I have honestly wanted to have on the show ever since I launched the podcast. Yalda Alaoui is the founder of Eat, Burn, Sleep. She is a London-based qualified naturopathic nutritionist with a foundation in biomedicine. She's a former capital markets professional and someone whose own diagnoses with ulcerative colitis and autoimmune hemolytic anemia set her on a path researching chronic inflammation and gut health. And ultimately, it's what led her to launch a platform to help others do the same. And I want to start really quickly before I turn it over to Yalda to just share a personal story because I actually first discovered Yalda 6 years ago in 2020 after hearing her speak on Caroline Stanberry's podcast. And what she said really stood out to me because I actually never really thought about gut health or inflammation. And frankly, I thought I was pretty healthy. I thought that I ate healthy. I was exercising all the time. I was, fairly fit and what I considered thin, but at the same time, I had a little bit of stubborn weight that wouldn't shift. And after following her for some time, I decided to sign up for Eat, Burn, Sleep. And I actually started it the same day that I had PRK eye surgery. So I was literally in bed recovering for a week. And I could not believe it, but I actually lost 7 pounds without even working out. I honestly felt amazing despite this surgery. And I was just so shocked because it really challenged everything that I knew about health and what the body needs in order to respond. So, Yalda, welcome to Supergene Unleashed. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to hear how the Eat, Burn, Sleep lifestyle impacts people. Of course I know, but whenever I hear it again, it's wonderful. So thanks for sharing
It
that.
has to feel rewarding because starting at the beginning of your story, I really want to dig into how things began because this was obviously a situation where you had your own health issues. So, what was actually happening in your own body and life that set you off on this course?
So just to give a little bit of background, there is autoimmunity that runs in my family. And I saw my mum suffer from Hashimoto's, but my mother, bless her, has never looked into the natural path. She's just popped the pills. And I had my grandmother, her mom, who suffered from systemic scleroderma, which is a really difficult condition to live with. I saw her suffer for many years, but she lived with that condition for much longer than the doctors had predicted then. There are longevity genes in her family. Her dad died at the age of 118. Given the severity of her case, the doctors gave her 2-3 years, and she survived 27 years. And what I watched was my grandfather, who was really into health. He would treat her with plants. He would do his own research, and he would tell me, I'm doing this, we're doing that, they were like doing all these things. So very early on in my life, I had an awareness that food could have a huge impact on your health outcome. But I also come from a family of doctors and pharmacists, so I'm not against medication, but I was made aware of that early. Fast forward a few years, I never thought I wanted to work in the health business. I wanted to work in finance. I worked in finance. And then I became pregnant with my first child. And pregnancy alters immunity.
Okay.
And my first autoimmune condition kick-started when I was 28, pregnant with my
Oh,
first
wow.
child. But sometimes it can work the other way, because when I was pregnant with my second child, I had a period of remission. So the immune system gets affected by pregnancy simply because when we are pregnant, the immune system has to change to not reject the fetus. So that sometimes women will have new allergies or will lose an allergy. They will see changes in them. And sometimes the changes go away and sometimes they last. So my first diagnosis was when I was pregnant with Will in 2007. I was 28, and I didn't take it seriously because I
Mm.
felt great. I had some symptoms, but I didn't feel bad. So the doctors were panicking, and I'm not someone who panics. And I was like, it's totally fine. Except 9 months after he was born, I really badly flared and I lost a ton of weight and I couldn't keep any food in. And I had all the very unpleasant symptoms of colitis. And I'm somebody who likes to
Mm.
understand. If something happens, I like to understand why. If people behave a certain way, I like to understand why. And I'm very analytical. So in this instance, I wanted to understand why I had this problem. Of course, doctors didn't have an answer because there is never one reason for a disease. I'll give you the example of lung cancer. You have many
Yeah.
smokers who don't ever get lung cancer, and then you have people who are non-smokers who get it. So, the disease is not simple. There's not one reason why people get ill. But I started on this path of trying to understand, trying to see if food had an impact. At that time, I kept being told that food had no impact, but I was thinking, there's no way. If you're taking medication and that has an impact, surely if you're putting something else in your mouth, it has an impact. And fast forward to 2012, I had another diagnosis of autoimmune hemolytic anemia, which is a far more severe disease because my body was destroying my red blood cells. So that's again an autoimmune. So to cut a long story short, after doing years of research, what I realized is my two autoimmune diseases had chronic inflammation in common, and that every single non-communicable disease, any health issue that you cannot catch, is linked to an immune system dysregulation, which is chronic inflammation. But then if you catch a virus and you are inflamed, as we've seen during COVID, when they would say if people have underlying health issues, i.e. underlying chronic inflammation, your immune system is less prepared to fight the virus and there can be a less positive outcome. So really, supporting the immune system for it to be in homeostasis, which is equilibrium, is really important for longevity, for prevention of diseases in general, whether we're talking about diabetes or cancers or heart attacks, autoimmunity, anxiety, depression, all of this is linked to chronic inflammation.
Yeah, that was actually one of the marquee facts that really stood out to me when I first started watching your master classes as part of the 6-week reset, because I actually never thought about it, but I had heard of many people having autoimmune conditions, and I had always wondered, I don't understand like what these are or how they come about. And certainly as I've gotten older, I started to see that more and more people seem to have these issues, that, as you say, you can't transfer it from me to you. And so when you explained all that, as part of the 6-week reset, it was extremely eye opening. And that's actually something that I want to ask you directly, because you referenced inflammation quite a lot. And it has really become this buzzword that, in some regards, I feel like it's also lost a bit of meaning. So, what do you wish that people actually understood about chronic inflammation that the Instagram wellness world completely distorts?
So, any influencer that you're watching, and if you scroll to their feed to 5 years ago and they were talking about recipes being vegan, and they're now telling you that a recipe is anti inflammatory, just unfollow them. Okay? Because I watch them. Okay? They come on my feed. I actually follow them. Okay?
Yeah.
because they're generally much better videographers than I am, and they're better photographers than I am, but definitely they're not as good researchers and nutritionists than I am. And a lot of them will give you a plate with foods which are on the red list. And they'll say, this is my anti-inflammatory meal. And people give it a like, and they're there in their crop top telling you how fabulous they are. But actually, they have no clue. Sorry to be blunt. The thing is, I come from a background of disease, okay? I was a patient. I was a patient who the doctors were at loss because the medical treatments did not work on me.
Oh.
I know now why. I was too inflamed. That's why sometimes a treatment works on somebody and not on somebody else, is because the immune system is not responding to the treatment because you've gone too far. That was me. So during my quest to get better, at that time you didn't have social media, but you had so many nutritionists, dietitians selling you dreams that they're going to fix you. And I'm the person who traveled to New York to see Dr. Hoffman. He was big at that time. To see Dr. Galland. I traveled to Austria. I traveled to Asia. I traveled to France. I traveled to remote places, anything to get a remission. And none of these things worked. Okay, so I was faced with my own mortality because with this blood disease, I was being kept alive with blood transfusions.
Oh.
My children were 2 and 4. There was no, I'm sorry to excuse my French, there was no bullshitting the world in my fake studio kitchen that I'm fabulous influencer and this is an anti-inflammatory plate when it's not. Okay, I was there and my blood test looked terrible. I was in my early 30s. I was between life and death, and I had to fix it. And recently, I went to St. Mark's Hospital in London, which is where I'm followed for gastro, even though I've been in remission since 2015 and medication free. I still go and have checks for my ulcerative colitis. And there was a junior doctor who didn't know me, and he's working under the professor who used to be with me. I guess she sends me to junior doctors now because she knows I'm well. I don't know. I'm just assuming. Anyway, so I was with the junior doctor, lovely guy, and he's scrolling through my medical history, which is heavy. And he goes, with his glasses like this, he looks at me, he goes, so are you taking anything at the moment? I said, no, I'm not. He goes, what's your secret? Because the odds for someone with my medical history to take 0 medication are very low. And I was thinking at the back of my head, am I going to bore him with Eat, Burn, Sleep? I thought, no, I looked at him, I said, it's a mix of dietary and lifestyle changes. But what I'm trying to say here is this word is being cheapened by people who don't understand what it is, who actually don't understand the science behind it. They're just using it because they're looking for likes and clicks. But it is the most important concept in medicine when it comes to prevention and longevity. Because if you are inflamed, your lifespan will probably shorten because you're more likely to trigger chronic inflammation triggers gene expression. So any condition that is non-communicable can be expressed.
Yeah. And so just to dive a little bit deeper on that, I mentioned that I was one of those women in a way that I thought I was relatively healthy. And so for someone who feels that way, but maybe feels a bit off, can you kind of break down like why someone could still be inflamed without knowing it? Because I think that's something else like that's a little bit important too. So obviously you had these diseases, and so that's how you really uncovered these truths. And it's so amazing to hear that you have been able to be in remission and medication free for 11 years now. But I'm sure that there's the vast majority of people out there as well that think that they're healthy but could have low grade inflammation. So how can someone understand if they have that going on with their body?
So the way we live now, most people have some of it, have a bit of it. So if you are into health and you want to optimize, it is important to address that. I will give you an example of a light expression of chronic inflammation and an example of a deeper expression. So an example of light expression is you have a little bit of anxiety, subclinical anxiety. So you have anxiety, but it's not so bad that you're getting medication.
Mm.
Okay. Subclinical anxiety directly linked to gut health and chronic inflammation. And we've helped so many people on the platform. In fact, recently I was in Hyde Park and this new mom stopped me. She was looking beautiful, super slim with her baby. And she said to me, I joined the platform not because I needed to lose weight, but because I have anxiety, and I had anxiety after I had my baby. And within weeks, she goes, I thought I was being healthy, but she's quite a health conscious person. She goes, that has transformed me. Within weeks, my anxiety was gone and my mood picked up. Okay, so subclinical anxiety, big one. Any joint issue, skin issues, rosacea, acne, premature aging, loss of collagen is linked to that. Anyone with bloating, digestive issues, 100% has chronic inflammation. Why? Because 70% of your immune system cells are in the gut, and that chronic inflammation is a dysregulation of the immune system. So having poor gut health causes chronic inflammation.
What about, really quickly, gas? Like, if someone has a lot of gas, is that a
Yeah.
sign?
Yeah, because a lot of gas shows that the microbiome is not balanced, and that can lead to chronic inflammation.
Okay.
So most of the time, people who are too gassy or for example, people who have acid reflux, any digestive issue will be linked to chronic inflammation. And then if it becomes bad, it becomes irritable bowel syndrome, which is an inflammatory condition. Or if it becomes even worse, it's inflammatory bowel disease, which is what I suffer from, that I've been diagnosed with. And that's an extreme case of an inflamed bowel. Other examples, psoriasis, ADHD linked to chronic inflammation. Many people who start the eat, burn, sleep lifestyle have much better cognitive function. Brain fog goes away, neuroinflammation drops. So
Yeah,
it's
my
not just
husband
anxiety.
said this, actually, because we did it together when we, started it, because we just kinda both felt like, nothing's working, and like I said, we started it together. It was at the beginning of the year, and he noticed that actually his remark was, more about feeling more stable with his mood and more energized as well and more clear-headed.
Correct. So when I was in nutrition school, I liked to study things that I didn't know much about. So we were given an assignment and I decided to do a deep dive into depression. I was shocked. The number of studies that link chronic inflammation to depression is astounding. But if
Really?
you go on social media for depression, all you hear about is therapy. But
Yeah.
therapy doesn't fix depression. Medication, around 50% of people who are put on antidepressants report feeling no better 18 months later.
Wow.
And things like exercise, saffron, anti-inflammatory diet show better results 2 years in.
Wow, saffron.
Yeah, saffron is a powerful
Yeah.
anti-inflammatory.
Wow.
Yeah, yes.
That's
So,
interesting and crazy because, yeah, you see as well, like, this whole movement about mental health and, it's okay to talk to somebody or seek help, but again, it comes down to what you put into your body about, what you get out of it, is what it
correct.
sounds like.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you an example. I said I would give you an easy example. So these little things,
Yeah.
bloating, gas, anxiety, low energy, brain fog, mood swings, things like that. Or being, recurrent infections like sinusitis or thrush, linked to a gut dysbiosis, which is gut bacteria, lack of equilibrium. But to give you more, stronger examples, yesterday I had somebody reach out to me for private coaching. So I take a few cases, generally complex cases. And this is somebody who, within the space of 12 months, got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, anxiety, but clinical anxiety, and is treated for it, high cholesterol, statins, and there was a fourth thing, I think joint pain, linked to it. She was in an absolute panic. I said to her, don't panic. It's all linked. I know it feels like everything's arriving at the same time and you're being given medication. So the medication she was taking some injections for the diabetes. She was taking antidepressants for the anxiety and statins for the cholesterol. And every single one of these things has a side effect. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. And ulcerative colitis. How could I forget? And colitis. So 4 things, okay? And they put her on Mounjaro, okay, for the diabetes. But then Mounjaro can trigger a colitis flare. So it helps regulate blood sugar levels, but it can trigger also an ulcerative colitis flare because it has a massive impact on the gut. So what happens when you take a lot of medication, and I was definitely that person, even though the medical treatments didn't work on me, they stopped me from worsening further. You start having side effects from the meds, and then they're trying to give you something to make up for that. So now they wanted to put her on a new treatment, stronger treatment for colitis. And I was like, hold on, we need to just peel it back to the basics. But the root of all of this, the root of diabetes, cholesterol. People don't realize that cholesterol and chronic inflammation have a binary relationship. Chronic inflammation increases cholesterol, but high LDL, which is bad cholesterol, increases chronic inflammation. So you're in a negative, vicious cycle.
Oh, wow.
And I was saying to her, we need to just fix the diet first, improve your bloods, and then you have the conversation with the doctor as to which medication can you start tapering down to reduce the side effects.
And have you seen the results from that yet, or is she still
No, that was the first goal. But I've done this before. So
yes.
I have had many times people who come to me with many things and they're in complete panic because they're like, oh my God, I have this and this and that. But actually, the root issue or the solution is often one thing, and that'll help all these things. That's why I have people who come on the platform and they say, oh, I came from my bloating, but my anxiety is better. I have, my joint pain is gone. My brain fog is gone. But the solution is kind of the same. You reduce inflammation.
Yeah, one of the things that you also brought up was, this gut health and gut-brain connection. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what exactly is it?
So we have neurotransmitters. So dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, GABA, those are neurotransmitters. But interestingly, they don't sit in the brain, they sit in the gut. And that's why we say that the gut is the second brain. So I'll give you a simple example. You are about to get an interview for a new job. And like half an hour before going in, you need to go to the bathroom and you have a little bit of diarrhea. Okay? That is a typical example of instant brain-gut connection effect. You're a little stressed, cortisol goes up, it creates something in your bowels. Likewise, we know that a gratitude prayer instantly improves the microbiome. So our tummies and our brains have really linked. And there is an increasing body of research showing now that for people with autism, with Asperger's, with ADHD, all these conditions can be massively improved by dietary changes. The expression of the symptoms can be massively improved. And in fact, when I started my research for ulcerative colitis, one of the first things that I looked into was a diet that was originally created for autistic children in Scandinavia.
And what did that show you?
Well, that was the beginning. That diet was not perfect, but that's when I started. Because what I had noticed is whenever I would flare with colitis, my mood would get highly impacted. And for anyone who suffers from bloating, they will notice that whenever they have gas and digestive upset, their mood gets impacted. And sometimes when your mood is low, your digestive system gets impacted. And I'll go a step further. Because the vagus nerve links the spine to the gastrointestinal tract, there is a link between the digestive system, the brain, and spine health. So you might have, I don't know, if you're someone who has chronic back issues, you will notice that when you eat bad food or your digestive system is not well, your back issues will kick in.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible just to hear all of these connections because, you just don't learn about it. And actually, it's kind of sad. I think that this should be a part of education because the world has changed so much, with so many options for food and so many, bad options, obviously, over processed food. And, the food quality has obviously massively declined over the years. And likewise, we are just bombarded with different stimulants. And so much of what you're talking about really sounds like it's coming back to basics. And that's really where I want to transition next because we've gotten really technical, which is amazing. And I just love learning about all these things. But the platform that you've created is actually quite simple and it's
Yeah.
called Eat, Burn, Sleep. And the name really lays a lot out there. But in super simple terms, can you just give a one sentence about what Eat, Burn, Sleep is? And then why, all three of these are pillars that are aiding, your approach.
So, first and foremost, I love food and I love a drink. Okay.
Me too.
So, so when I was ill, all I wanted to do was to be able to digest again and enjoy a glass of champagne on my birthday. I was like, can I? That's all I'm asking from the universe. So the way I created this lifestyle that was originally for me, that I share now with everyone, is it was a question of what can I get away with. It's a bit of a naughty approach, okay? It's not a perfectionist approach. We're not here to be, gods in nutrition. We're here to have fun. And what is the max fun we can have without impairing our health? And that's why we have a treat system. So I wanted to identify the lists of food that I could eat from safely. And what is it that I can have once in a while without triggering a flare? So I created this food list for myself originally, offering a lot of flexibility. So you can go to a restaurant, you can go to more or less, you don't want to eat out all the time because the quality of food is not as good as when you have control over the process at home. But it is a very simple way of living. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. If you want to have your glass of wine, if you want to have your cake, you can have it all. It's a question of how much. And then we do swaps. As you know, we have all these cakes on the platform that taste amazing. I have a sweet tooth, so I didn't want to give up on chocolate brownies. I didn't want to give, and that's how I ended up creating all these recipes. It's because it's what I wanted to eat without hurting myself, without setting myself back on my healing journey. So Eat, Burn, Sleep is a very simple platform that's super accessible, that covers food, movement, and mental wellness. So how to eat without being too restrictive while seeing improvements. You want things to be yummy, you want to have a good time. How to work out without exerting yourself and without triggering inflammation as well, because many workouts are inflammatory and some people will put themselves through crazy things thinking they're being healthier and that it actually makes them gain weight or have more anxiety or have more, symptoms of whatever they're suffering from. And last but not least, the mental wellness part is a way of looking at life from a glass is half full, because that's how I am. And I think that if you have a positive mindset, cortisol is lower. And if cortisol is lower, you're less inflamed. So if you're following a diet super strictly and you're miserable, that's not good. Because that will trigger stress and that's counterproductive. And you'll probably end up binging.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I myself, at one point in time, I think I tried Atkins and I didn't even last a day. I broke down immediately. And then for a little period of time, I was a little bit vegan, and that really didn't work out either. And that's the thing. I think that women often are faced with so many situations where they take on these protocols and diets, hoping that it's going to be this amazing thing that's finally it for them. And that's what I really want to get to with Eat, Burn, Sleep. What is it about Eat, Burn, Sleep that is different, that really helps women in specific? Because women also are at a disadvantage with being faced with so much research that they take on and experiment with themselves, and they actually don't know that it was research only performed on a man. And as you know, our anatomy is different, especially in our reproductive years. So if you could talk a little bit more directly about how Eat, Burn, Sleep is a positive lifestyle for women, and how women can understand that a little bit more, that would be great.
Yes. So it was very important for me to create something that was simple and accessible to all, but actually it's very precise. And for people who want to understand more, there's a lot of education on the platform. Many doctors actually use it to educate themselves on chronic inflammation and nutrition. But when you look at it, it's quite easy to follow and very simple, but it's super finely calibrated. And the reason why it is good for everyone, but really good for women, is because we are supporting all the systems at the same time. The meal planner, as it is, works on blood sugar regulation, which will help with cortisol regulation because it's very closely linked. And it's also going to help you feel fuller and not get those crazy cravings. The second thing we work on is digestive health. So, although the meals look very simple, the way they're structured and the meal timing of everything is to promote good gut health, because that in turn will impact everything. You know, excess estrogen gets stored in the gut. Perimenopause symptoms can be linked to gut, you know, um, to gut flora. In fact, when women enter the perimenopause, they start having changes to their microbiome. So it's even more important to support gut health. Same thing with cortisol, because they see that progesterone levels drop. They get a little anxious, a little moody. Really important to stabilize cortisol to lessen the mood swings. The third thing that the Eat, Burn, Sleep lifestyle does is support liver health. So, for example, the Atkins diet, although it supports blood sugar levels, is terrible for liver health.
Hmm.
Not enough vegetables, too high in fat. Okay. And the liver performs hormone homeostasis, which is hormonal balancing, very important for any women of any age. It also performs lipolysis, which is fat burning, and it performs close to 500 functions in the body. The next thing that we do is we work on musculoskeletal health, which is your bone density and your muscle density. So there is this trend today of really lifting very heavy weights and so on. But the way the Eat, Burn, Sleep workouts are designed is that you are getting that burn, you are building that muscle, but not so much that it's triggering inflammation, which then will lead to being exhausted or getting water retention, feeling bigger after a workout. And also, if you're inflamed, your mood will go down. So, what I try and do is look at all the angles, because health is complex. For example, the glucose goddess, who looks only at blood sugar regulation, comes with crazy solutions where for her, a Diet Coke is a better solution than a carrot juice. Because if you're just looking at glucose, you're saying Diet Coke, but aspartame has been linked to cancer. And that actually really destroys gut bacteria, which then gut bacteria later down the line really impacts blood sugar regulation. That's why we know now that weight loss and gut health are really closely linked. And I think this is one of the many reasons why when people come off the weight loss jabs, because it has a negative impact on gut bacteria, they see even more weight gain on the back of it, on top of having lost muscle mass and bone mass, and we know now organ mass, and probably have unbalanced their pancreatic function because of the medication when they were not diabetic in the first place. Okay? So I try, because I come from a standpoint of a patient, and I guess because I have this background of finance, quite analytical, whenever I look at a problem, whether it is a health issue, politics, anything, I will try and think of all the angles, all the things that might be impacted. So the eat, burn, sleep lifestyle, although it looks simple, is actually very finely calibrated. And there is a reason why I allow people treats from the red food lists, what I call the red food list. The reason for that, there are actually 3 reasons. The 3 scientific reasons of why you should be having bad food once in a while. Okay? And I don't like to say bad food, but treats, from the red food list.
What are
the
they?
First one. So the first one is oftentimes these foods or drinks are presented to people in social settings. And social interactions are the number one factor for longevity. So if I have members of the platform who will not want to go to a social gathering because they don't want to be tempted by a glass of wine, then it's counterproductive. They're better off going and having a glass of wine, not 5, but 1 or 2. That's the first reason. The second reason is when you stop anything 100% for a long time, you lose the gut bacteria to digest it. So it is important to keep a little bit of exposure to different food groups. And it is important to not cut out a food group completely for too long. And the third reason is a metabolism reason, is to keep something that's called metabolic flexibility. And metabolic flexibility is the key to a good working metabolism and to a healthy weight, meaning that if your metabolism is able to tap into your blood sugars for energy and then switch to your fat stores and switch back to your blood sugars with ease, you are in better health. So I'll explain. When you're on eat, burn, sleep, because we're stabilizing your blood sugar levels, you're basically turning your fat stores into glucose for energy, which is what happened to you when you were in bed.
Yeah.
Okay. You didn't need to exercise, just the food put your body into a fat adapted state where you were not hungry, you didn't exercise like crazy, and you lost weight. Okay. But I also want your body to be able to switch and use the sugar that's in your blood when it's there, and then go back to utilizing the fat. And by bringing in treats once in a while, you help the body do this so it keeps the agility to go for blood or to go for fat stores to use glucose.
Yeah, that's eye-opening, because again, most people think that in order to make changes, that it is saying goodbye to alcohol forever or, having cheese or a chocolate or these kind of things. And that is what I love about Eat, Burn, Sleep. Again, that you call it a lifestyle and it's not about having restriction. And that's what I just wanted to ask. So if someone's listening and they're like, oh my gosh, I am probably the most unhealthy person, I am doing all the wrong things, can somebody, and they think I must have the worst gut health ever, is it possible to restore your gut health and get the quote unquote good bacteria in there?
Yes. So microbiologists have shown that the gut bacteria, with changes in the input, starts shifting within 3 days.
Oh, wow. That's
So
quick.
that's amazing. And that's why you see people who start the eat, burn, sleep lifestyle, and in a week they say to you, oh my God, I don't have gas anymore. I don't have bloating. within very quickly. So you start with the 6-week reset on Eat, Burn, Sleep because 6 weeks is 42 days. It's a quarantine. It's a cycle for humans. So it takes 3 weeks to rewire habits. Generally, the first 3 weeks, you're thinking about everything you're eating. After 3 weeks, that's it. You're on autopilot. You know how to do this. You barely need to look at the food list anymore. You're good. You're doing your mental wellness. You're doing your exercise. You're watching the master classes for education, but you're not like checking the food all the time because it's in here already. And after 6 weeks, it's a full cycle. And generally, that 6 weeks allows you to see the results. And then we move on to after 6 weeks, which is a bit more relaxed on the treats. You can have a bit more treats. It's much more adapted to life, but you're not completely, it's not a diet that you've stopped. You actually continue. And a year, 6 months in, 1 year in, you're still seeing amazing results. And then the beauty of it is you don't even notice you're doing this anymore because that's the way you live. And before you know it, you realize that actually, for your age, you're doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely something that I witnessed myself. And it always was something that I felt like if I fell off the bandwagon, it was easy to come back to. It was easy to, kind of get back in gear. And you talk a lot about this 80-20 and having that balance and, not feeling guilty if you indulge, because you did call out rightfully so that being social is one of the markers for longevity. I mean, I could continue talking to you for so long. I want to ask you a final question before we kind of wrap things up is what would be the biggest piece of advice that you would give to a woman who is exhausted, like maybe she just really can't, get all of these areas in life together, eat, burn, sleep. If she had to pick kind of one area to focus on, or maybe it just seemed overwhelming, how can someone who's listening just start, like start today? What would you recommend that they do?
So, people who are exhausted or have big goals, I often say just start with the food, like you did. Start with the food and try and walk a little more. And in fact, on the lifestyle, the first week, there's no exercise because it's nice to allow the body to adapt. And I don't believe in shocking the body because any form of shock can be an inflammatory trigger. So if there is a woman who's listening, who's overwhelmed, who's exhausted, who's got many things juggling in her lives, maybe children, maybe parents, maybe work, maybe partners, women have a lot to deal with emotionally. Emotionally, we carry a lot. We're the carrier of our homes. I would say get on the platform, just look at the food lists and start doing that. And once you feel comfortable in the evening, rather than scrolling on TikTok, or Instagram, which has been shown to lower the IQ, okay, go on the platform and watch one 20-minute masterclass. You're learning something and you're empowering yourself with knowledge. And slowly, slowly, you start building. And then maybe 3 weeks down the line, you're going to start with one of the stretch videos that I do, one of the mobility, maybe do a little movement, start with a beginner, and you realize that it's only 20, 30 minutes that you can do in your home. You don't even need to drag yourself in the gym. You can even do it in your pajamas. And you start weaving these habits into your life in a way that's not shocking you, that's not exhausting you, that's not stressing you. You're not trying to be perfect. You're bringing slow, lasting change. And as you feel better and your mind starts clearing up, you will have more energy to commit to this lifestyle more.
I love that. I mean, you really give a practical approach that is not overwhelming. You rightfully said that women carry so much of a load. So I super love how you have made Eat, Burn, Sleep approachable. It's not daunting whatsoever. And to my fellow super genes, if this episode spoke to you, please send it to a woman who needs to hear it. Share your biggest takeaway and let us know what landed with you most. Until next time, keep listening to your body, trusting your power, and unleashing your gut instinct super gene. Yalda, thank you so much. Really quickly before we go, just tell everybody how they can find you.
So you can go on eatburnsleep.com, and you can also follow me on social media, Eat Burn Sleep.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.